All right, welcome back, all of you, to the continuation of our conference. And glad you chose this session where we have actually two speakers today in a case study of John Cockerill. So I'm very happy to have today with me Benoit Delvaux from John Cockerill and also Vincent Sterken from Delaware, who accompanied John Cockerill in their implementation. So I'm not going to say much more. I'm going to say welcome, Vincent and Benoit, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Guy. All right, so hello everyone and welcome to this session about how John Cockerill built his new Hub for Teamwork. So let's set the context. As you know, the past few months have been pretty challenging for many organizations. A lot of people had to suddenly switch to home office. So the workplace has quite changed. Trends were accelerated by COVID. What used to be a smooth evolution of the workplace rather became kind of a rush by the circumstances. Indeed, now home working is part of the equation and it is not going to change. Teams are more distributed across globe and time zones, and employees need and want more flexibility in their schedules and work-life balance. In short, COVID has forced us to adapt faster and proved a new work collaboration approach was possible, what we call the hybrid workplace. Yet, there are still all challenges that remain. For example, with the multiplicity of tools and communication channels, some people still wonder, where did I store that information or document? How do we keep the way we collaborate quite structured? How can I easily find the tools I need to do my job? Also, with the remote working condition, you hear such concerns such as, problem with my slide. So you hear such remarks such as, how can I organize engaging meetings when and how my colleagues are available? Or what about the coffee corner talks we used to have? These are just some of the challenges that remain in the equation. So what we learn is that digital technologies, okay, they help us being more agile, more collaborative, innovative and stuff. But most importantly, they help us have a more engaging workplace, and that is important. So where do I start and how do I embark on this journey? First, we are going to introduce quickly John Cockerill. So John Cockerill is a group with a 200-year history that started with the Industrial Revolution, basically on working on steam engines and being a major actor in the production of steel. In the past 20 years, we have shifted to more technological fields. We are improved our service offering and broadened our presence in the world. And we are proud to be of our history, of course, but definitely turn towards our future. So our workforce has more than 5,000 people around the world and is a good mix of different cultures, nationalities, profiles, and generations. Our core mission is to meet the needs of our times. While the world changes more rapidly, it also faces ever complex challenges that John Cockerill wants to address. For example, the access to renewable energy, sustainability, preserving natural resources, contributing to a greener mobility, and finally fighting against insecurity. To conclude on John Cockerill history, here are some of our key realizations. For example, if you go this summer in the south of Belgium, you will maybe see the Arc Major, which is one of our realizations. We are also active in the implementation of solar farms around the globe. We make also a lot of investments in renewable energy, such as wind turbines, and we are at the forefront of the hydrogen revolution. So now let's get back to the digital workplace. With this implementation, John Cockerill wanted to be an innovative, efficient, and attractive company, offering our colleagues a modern, integrated, and easy-to-use workplace without any compromise on security. That was our mission statement for this project. So to address those challenges under the challenging circumstance of COVID, we decided to focus on the collaboration aspects of the digital workplace first. To do that, we followed 3 principles. The first one is to involve the business at various levels and profiles within the organization. The second one is to provide a flexible governance implemented in the tools. That is, having governance on paper or lost somewhere in your internal procedure brings no real value. So that's some direction that we didn't want to take. The third one is paying attention to the change and foresee continuous improvement afterwards. Let's assume that reinforcement will always be needed anyway. So about the collaborative approach, let's talk about it. So the approach here was really to be inclusive. So it means that, okay, the project after all was about collaboration. So we were very well aware as a project team that onboarding all sectors and profiles of people will be key to the success of this project. So that's why during the project, we could rely on a collaboration framework in order to achieve our goals. So there are different roles that are part of it. So first you have the business partner, the IT business partners, which consist of 5 people in the organization, 1 per sector. Those people are from the business, but they make the bridge with IT. They serve as relays within the sectors, especially on major IT projects like this one. Then you have a network of ambassadors, which consists of about 100 people, which promotes the good use of the platform and inspire their colleagues. Then you have business key users, which represent a few dozen people across the sectors, and those were involved in impact analysis workshop. Finally, you have the project team consisting of John Cockerill IT team and Delaware that work really as one team. It's a good mix of people from John Cockerill and that we could capitalize on our knowledge of the business, and people from Delaware, which we could capitalize on the know-how on Office 365 and the digital workplace. Also, during this project, we adopted the eat your own dog food approach. That is that to deliver that project, we use the same tool that we were going to provide to our colleagues. So for us, it seemed obvious that we had to keep such dynamic and the philosophy in the post-implementation phase, that is the run phase. So for the run phase, we slightly adapted the collaboration framework into different teams and committees that each have their own reasons to exist. So first, you have the core team, which consists of 5 people, including Vincent and myself. Those are based on the project team, and the mission is to ensure the adoption, evolution, and management of the ecosystem, and also to identify new opportunities in the long run. Then you have the technical committee, which is the core team plus IT, which purpose is to address infrastructure and security aspects. Then next, you have the governance committee, which consists of the IT business partners plus the core team that I mentioned before, that follow the usage on the KPIs for the adoption, that validate the policy change and major change requests, and onboard new business units of the group in the platform. Then you have the community of practice, which is the core team plus 2 people by sector. So it means it's about 15 people in total. And here the goal is to share experience, use case ideas, best practice, guidelines, tips and tricks, and so on around the ecosystem. And finally, you have the ambassadors, which will remain in the run phase, but in a less active role. It's more that a community of knowledge, let's say, and they can share information with each other. Okay, so what I detailed here are some elements of our governance, but as previously explained, governance on paper or on slide is not enough. So Vincent will now give you more insight on what we mean by embedded governance. Back to you, Vincent.
Thank you. So indeed, when we are working within a digital workplace, we need an actual workspace to work within, right? And these workspaces, as Benoit mentioned, we want to have this in a flexible way, make it easy for people to actually start their work, but also keep a measure of control while we are doing this from an organizational perspective. Now, I'm assuming for a lot of you as well, the entry point of the digital work environment, the virtual work environment, is centered around Microsoft Teams. And so this is our cornerstone where we started from, next to the virtual meetings that we do, of course, all the collaboration aspects as well. Now, you are at a digital workplace conference, so I hope I can safely assume that everybody knows Teams, but just in case there's someone who don't, simply put, it's a collaboration framework platform provided by Microsoft, in which you can work out loud, share conversations within a particular team, within a particular context, work on file management, document management capabilities, and extend the working environment with all the other Office 365 tools that they have in their portfolio. Now, if you leave this open, simply put, and everybody starts creating their different workspaces in Teams, there's always a risk that you run into a bunch of chaos. On the other hand, if you lock it down from the beginning, the adoption will become difficult as well, and you are effectively blocking people in their work. So we have a few essentials to keep in mind when it comes to avoiding that chaos. So first off, the team creation. Right? I mentioned you can't just open it up for everyone willy-nilly. On the other hand, we do want everyone to be able to request their team and get access in a relatively timely fashion instead of logging in IT tickets and then you have to wait 2 weeks before you get your environment. So self-service in requesting it is important. On the other hand, we need a measure of control, so have an approval process in place so that you can keep that control. Next to this, Teams, they just come in the interface as is, one under the other. You don't get a lot of context out of the box. So we want to add some different elements in terms of classification, add some metadata at the team level, and also have this applied in terms of automated naming conventions. In terms of structure and the content and how this is managed, you want some consistency across the organization, where if you have a particular type of team, a project, let's say, if you jump from one to the other, you see the same structure coming back and you give some guidance to your users on how to use it in terms of having the same channels, folder structures, particular apps that are available, for instance, in your environment. Ideally managed by the business. Now, user management, again, you want to have this in a controlled manner, ideally locally, because if you keep this with your IT system only, your IT and infrastructure only, then this will become a bit cumbersome to manage. But you want some additional controls in place there as well, and some bulk actions to facilitate people's work. Big risk of this kind of environment is that you create your different workspaces and that they remain available until the end of days, because nobody actually ever takes the time to archive what you don't need anymore. So flexible lifecycle management that helps you reduce the noise within the environment needs to be automated as well to make life easier for everyone. And finally, you have your security that you want to be able to manage in a simple way, internally and externally. You don't want to open up external sharing just like that for everyone. On the other hand, you want this to be a seamless process as well. So if we apply all these different essentials, these different principles into our environment, what we have come up with is a central point for your collaboration for managing all those workspaces with self-service capabilities and organizational governance already in place and applied by the system, and not, as Benoit mentioned, just sitting somewhere idly in a document. And this is an application that we have aptly called Workspaces. Now, from an end user perspective, essentially what you see is a dashboard hub that you have within your Teams environment that you see here in your left navigation and left rail of Teams itself. So it's already within the environment that people are working in. And within this dashboard, there's a number of different features. You see some of the different types that we have defined within the different teams. An overview of them are active for me, but also the request process is embedded in here. But instead of just showing you a slide, let me show you something in our testing environment. This is not a production environment. So this is not production data, but the environment itself is based on the same code. And so what we have here is, as I mentioned, a way of creating a new workspace, actually requesting a new workspace. And we do this in a guided process via a wizard, right? You have your different types, which were defined in the context of John Cockerill. And so if I take one example, you see there's already some context that's added that's very specific. Let's keep this simple for now. Sometimes this is mandatory. In this case, this is not mandatory. In certain cases, these can be mandatory. And we want an additional classification telling me for which business unit this is. And within John Cockerill, they work within sectors, so we also identify the sector. Now you already see here that we've applied a naming convention automatically, which takes the name and the code of the business unit. And this will, we cannot change this at this level. That particular part of the naming convention is mandatory. A description. And that's been want to. Now the next step is, so we've seen context already, we've seen naming conventions applied. When I finish this, there will be an approval process, of course. We were also talking about keeping consistency within the structure. And so we have a number of different templates that we have made available, which will provision a Teams with the applied naming convention, but also with predefined structure. And so you see this gray one, this is available for all workspaces of this particular type that I've selected. The link with more explanation. It has a few channels in this example. This more clear one is one that was specifically developed by the business unit so that they have more structured, suited to their particular needs, with, in this case, some additional folders and some apps as well. I was talking about flexible governance. This means we have a standard for everyone, but the flexibility has gone to a selected number of people in the organization that can expand for better use within their processes and their working environment as well. I also mentioned security, which is quite important. And so I'm not going to talk about all of these, but more importantly, we can indicate if something is private or public. We do not allow, the governance does not allow for this type to be public, so we do not have that choice. And discoverable means I can find it back in our dashboard. Not discoverable, it is hidden for me. And more importantly, external guests, we have the choice to either allow or not allow this, and this can be dynamically after creation as well, so that even if we do give external guests access at some point, we can always revoke this easily for the entire workspace later as well. And finally, membership. Standard in Teams, you have your owners and your members. This we have as well, of course. We indicate also a principal owner, so the person who's really in charge of maintaining this, and the rest is backup. And next to adding people as members, it is also possible, if you have predefined security groups, to add them in here, and we keep that membership in sync if need be. Now the next step is just looking for a duplicate, then the approval process would then automatically be triggered. Now to keep it simple, I'm not going to go into the Teams itself. There is some additional organizational features that you have as well. You have an additional dashboard where you get an overview, in this case, of my active workspaces. And you see here already the additional context displayed, right? The title, the naming convention, the principal owner, and the things that are common across the different environments. And you have some more context that's available from this menu. Now, also mentioned, we want to make it easier for an owner actually to do some bulk actions. So we have some additional actions here where you can easily remove, replace users, move them from one group to the other in bulk if need be. And finally, you see here archive and delete. This can be an active action by someone. We can archive it, we can delete it. Quite often this does not happen. So actually in the background, there's a lifecycle management that is determined for the different types. Is based on actual activity within the workspace itself, right? So when you are not using it anymore, X time after, it will automatically trigger the archiving mechanism going forward. All right. Now this is a bit what Workspaces does, how the governance is applied automatically, dynamically from within the context of where we are working. But build it and they will come is something that has never ever worked in the history of IT projects. So we do need to really pay attention to the user adoption part of this equation as well. And there's a few drivers to keep in mind, right? Because in the end, an IT project is never a technical project as such. I mean, the technical basis is a given, but you really want to change the minds and the behaviors of people across the board. And so you focus on communication, obviously, training and learning, obviously as well. People need to be able to work with the system. They need to know what is going on. But next to this, change leadership is quite important as well. And so our network of ambassadors, for instance, was quite instrumental in helping us out, as were local team leads, because if a team lead doesn't want to use it, his team won't either, and support from top management as well in a vocal way, which also links into working from an organizational perspective with, as I mentioned, for instance, the team leads, and also aligning a bit the processes to make sure that it works. Now, in the end, user adoption is a journey, right? We start somewhere, but we don't know exactly when it will end, because in essence, it will be a continuous process of improvement. And if we go through different steps, and I'll give you some examples as well. First of all, we need to make people aware what we are doing, that it exists, and what we are aiming for. And so you see here the example of video message by the project sponsor on why we're doing this. We give some introduction around the wider Office 365 universe, the onboarding of the 100+ ambassadors that I talked about earlier, and we provided them as well with some material that they could then use to propagate more information within the organization. So now people know that it exists. We want to make sure they actually want to use what we are offering, right? And so we work there on several axes as well. On the one hand, we work with top management, where we gave them individual coaching sessions, some reverse mentoring, if you will, where a young'un explains and helps the more established people in an organization. So top management on one hand. On the other hand, we worked with people from the business in impact analysis workshops, where we really looked at what we have now rolled out and are rolling out. How can you, use this specifically within your part of the organization, and which processes can you or should you adapt, and which tools are most suited for what you want to do, and then propagate that further. And have some testimonials to make this visible again towards the other colleagues. Okay, it exists. You may want to use it. Now, you also want to use it in a correct manner. So, as mentioned earlier, we've provided, I want to say classroom training, but virtual trainings in these times of COVID, obviously, for a number of people. But next to this, we also provided a help portal, again, within the context of Teams. So left navigation, also in the context of Workspaces, where we had documentation that could be used, categorized in a logical way, but also a link towards some webinars, the trainings, and so on. Specific attention was given to our ambassadors as well. So, as been well mentioned, eat your own dog food. We created a team for the ambassadors where they would get some heads up, some information before the other people would get it, some announcements of what we're doing, the resources that we put at their disposition, so that they could use it going forward as well. And most importantly, as the expert channel, where they had a semi-direct link to us, so they could ask questions going forward that we could answer, that they can then help answer other people in the organization. But in the beginning, most of those answers were coming from us. But as time went on, we saw that the interaction between the ambassadors started to work as well, and they started answering one ambassador to the other if they had some tips or trips to be given. So there was a nice dynamic at some point going on. People know it, they want it, they know how, and now we've been using it for a while. You might want to use it even a bit better, and you have some not general questions, but more specific questions about how to use certain things, use it in a better way. So we need to work on the ability. And so we've foreseen, on the one hand, a video with some 10 things to do and also not do within the environment, some coffee corners where people could, again, come ask questions, where 80 to 120 people asking questions and respond to those while we would go along, but also ambassadors that did more smaller experience sessions within the organizations at a lower scale. But as I mentioned, it's a journey, right? So we've done all these activities, but it's not because we've done all of this that we can stop. So we need to reinforce, again, the message and the way of working, so we don't just fall back on what we know. And we need to come back to this. So the ambassadors, part of those morphed into the community of practice, as mentioned by Buma, where they would go and involve themselves in the future, let's say. We measure the adoption going forward. There's additional trainings that we still have. It's in the onboarding process. We integrated some trainings around digital workplace as well. And going forward, we had a help portal with a lot of some static content and some webinars and some trainings. We are now having this evolve as well into a more dynamic portal based on the feedback that we've received, so people get some new news and get some new information as well coming through. So just an example of things that are continuously changing and being improved upon. All in all, 80 change management activities, more or less, over the course of a year, including sponsors, different team meetings, live events, publications on the intranet, some tips. But going forward, we've seen it before, we have our community of practice that will think about new ideas, that will capture information from the business. We'll relay this back to the governance team. We'll also monitor the changes in the platform itself. And of course, this will get relayed back to the technical committee, because it's not because you've invented it and thought of a new way, better way of working things, that it will happen by itself. So we have a short line to the technical committee to make sure that everything happens in a timely fashion. And this provides us with a solid base for the future, as Benoit will be able to elucidate upon.
All right, thank you, Vincent. So what's next for John Cockerill? So with this project, we provided our colleagues with a hub for teamwork, which is also the entry point for the whole Office 365 suite and the broader digital workplace. But on a more down-to-earth perspective, it had other direct benefits. Indeed, it supported John Cockerill's people during the pandemic, allowing our colleagues to stay connected and engaged with respect of their work-life balance. Also, it is actually the first step, since the ecosystem will evolve to meet ever-changing collaboration needs. Indeed, at John Cockerill, we are actively building a broader ecosystem based on other building blocks such as the Power Platform, Dynamics 365, and SAP, to name few. The Hub for Teamwork is also a building block in itself of our ecosystem that will capitalize on each time there are collaboration needs to be met. Finally, in terms of geographical reach, there is still some some room to improve. As you can see on this slide, there are still quite an important portion of our workforce that we need to onboard on the platform. So what have we learned during this project? So let's wrap up everything. So first is to be inclusive. It is really the first step to a broad adoption. Capitalize on the perspectives of different people, profiles, cultures, and generations. Make them active players on the project. Then, as Vincent explained, provide an automated governance. So don't assume a written governance is enough. Be where your people at. This will dramatically lighten the burden on IT. Also allow them to focus on delivering more and more new capabilities and stay at the edge. They will be able to focus on that mission rather than doing some administration stuff and stuff. So finally, strengthen the adoption. Be conscious it is only the beginning. The approach, build it, and they will come, somehow never works. So it's important to see this as a continuous process that needs to be reinforced and extended. And despite all the efforts put in communication and so on, just assume it's not enough, and you will need reinforcement in the long run anyway. So be aware of that. So these were the lessons learned that we wanted to share with you. So now let us know what question you would have and what you would like to know, and we'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Benoit and Vincent, for this interesting presentation. We had a little bit of a technical hiccup in the sense that you can only view the presentation via the YouTube channel directly with the YouTube link. So I would encourage people, if you still have questions, to enter them in the YouTube chat directly. I'll have a look as well to see if there's any additional questions in the Whova chat. There was actually one question earlier from someone at Jan de Nul group asking how many people were there in the project team.
So it depends on the phase of the project, but to give an idea, it was something like 5, 6, 7 people maybe. And depending on the phase on the project, then you had some people added to the project team temporarily, and so it evolved. But to give an idea of order, something like that.
So what you had a core team, but that when we were involving the business in those impact analysis, of course, the number grew. Some people from the business that we were requesting information from, but the core team remained consistent across the project.
Okay. All right, very good. Another question that I have here is, how did you handle teams that were already created before Workspaces was implemented? How did you go about?
So actually, there was a pilot phase that happened earlier, I think even 2019. So there were indeed a number of teams that were created where the system was left quite open. Now, we worked in different stages. The Workspaces app in itself knows that these teams exist. So they become what we call unmanaged teams. And there's actually, from within the application, you can, as an owner of an unmanaged team, you can make it a managed team as well, which was part one, being the soft approach, just a few clicks, and everything is regulated. But then, of course, some people will do this, some people will not do this. And so different stages is going from soft to a more heavy-handed approach, let's say, continuing the soft approach with some more communication, talking to the different owners so that they take an action by themselves. And in the end, we need to go to a more, let's say, heavy-handed approach where we will archive unused ones automatically, and will trigger some of them in the end, and with some warnings and giving people to react, obviously, before that.
Okay, that sounds like a reasonable approach. So, okay, thanks for that. Looking to see if there's any final questions coming in, but I don't see any right now. So I think we can close off here. So thanks again, Vincent, Benoit, for an interesting presentation. Always happy to hear about these kind of implementations where there's a lot of user adoption involved and a lot of methodology around getting that user adoption to the levels that you want to see. So interesting to see what your approach was there. So I think this deserves a virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
All right, very good. So, all right, we're going to end this session here. So the next session is at 2:15, 14:15. So in a little bit less than 10 minutes from now, you will have again the choice between two breakout sessions. So see you in one of those two breakout sessions and see you for the rest of the conference. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.